Hey, what's up, y'all? This is Lewis Speaks 2025, and today I want to talk to you all about masculinity. I just got back from the gym, a place where men go in order to not only work out their physical bodies, but also work out their egos and gain a sense of mastery and a sense of achievement, which bolsters their feelings, their good feelings about their own masculinity. Some men, not all, I want to preface that, not all, some men have this deep insecurity about their masculinity. And that presents differently on various men. Some men, that insecurity about their masculinity forces them to overcompensate. Other men, it forces them to go inward, go deep into a shell. And those men oftentimes exhibit an awkwardness around other men. They find it difficult to engage with other men in the way that most men engage. For example, I was looking at how men give each other a greeting. Oftentimes it's a dap. It's a dap. There is this awkwardness with some men in giving a dap. Either the dap is too hard, like that overcompensating, or it's just too light, And I think that we as men, we have got to redefine masculinity. We have got to really ask ourselves what we think being a man really means. What is our definition of what being a man is, For me, being a man is being accountable. It's taking ownership. Also, being a man is being decisive, being resolute. Being a man is being solid in self, knowing who you are. It's also about the presentation. We have to talk about the presentation, because every man presents differently. Some men have very feminine traits, and that's because they grew up around a lot of women. I have to be honest, a lot of mothers who are single mothers, they raise their sons to be the fantasy man of their dreams, not necessarily the man who that boy is intended to be. So you have a lot of female-led households trying their best to raise a man, and oftentimes what ends up happening is that they raise the man to be what they needed as opposed to what that boy needed, And this is why it's so important for fathers to be in the home raising their sons. I can't tell you enough, and I can't stress enough the importance of a man in the house. I don't care what society tells you, having a man in the household is necessary. Historically, the government has tried to remove black men, especially black men, from the home by way of stringent welfare laws and all this other stuff. It has made men feel insignificant. It has made them feel impotent in ways. And this is why many of the men just left the families, because they felt as though they didn't have a voice. Their opinion didn't matter. What they said didn't count. Oftentimes they gained identity from providing and protecting. And when they couldn't provide, they felt irrelevant, insignificant. And so they just left. But times have changed. We start to see that there is a consequence for all these men leaving. A lot of the boys went without fathers, went without nurturance, went without healthy masculine tenderness. That's what we need nowadays. We need that masculine tenderness. We don't need these hyper masculine alpha male type performances, because that's exactly what they are. We as men are stuck in performing masculinity as opposed to being masculine. And I think we have got to stop performing. We have got to stop auditioning for our own masculinity, because the truth is, it's already inside of us. We have that naturally. That is a God-given gift, But I think that it's been thwarted, like most things, it's been distorted, it's been thwarted, it's been derailed as a result of original sin, as a result of imperfection. But I think we need to get back to healthy masculinity. And I think in many ways, we've lost touch with that. We've lost touch with the definition of what it means to be a man. You know, oftentimes men would attribute their masculinity by how much they could hurt, kill, torture, abuse, control, dominate. But that's not being a man. That's being a devil. That's being a demon. That's being evil. That's not what being a man is, you know? And I think so many of us are lost, especially young men, you know? When I see young gay men especially, I think that they don't know how to interact with other men outside of seduction, outside of sex. You know, many gay men, they want healthy friendships, right? They want healthy masculine friendships. They want to fit in, you know? But a lot of them just struggle. And I see that often. There's always this performing masculinity. Like, it's what they feel like they have to be as opposed to who they really are. And I see this when they're trying to pick up trade, for example. And what does it mean to pick up trade? Picking up trade means you see a man who is this masculine ideal, which is oftentimes big muscles, broad chest, deep voice, you know, hard mannerisms like that. So that's trade. So oftentimes gay men will adjust their posture, will adjust their presentation and butch up, if you will, in order to attract the trade and pull the trade. I call it tricking the trade. But what ends up happening is that they can't sustain that because it's really not part of their identity. There is this awkwardness. You know, it's almost like we as men, heterosexual or homosexual, we as men are almost locked out of our masculinity. You know, it's like we left our masculinity in the Garden of Eden, and those flaming swords that keep swirling outside of the garden won't permit us access to our masculinity. I think that was the first time we had maybe the only time we really had a perfect masculine form. And I think we need to get back to being men. You know, there's so many men out here who are wearing makeup and eyelashes and all this other craziness. And that's crazy because that's typically a sign with female. You know, that's typically a sign with being a woman. And I know people are going to come for me for this, but you know something? I see so many men who don't know how to be men. They keep on trying to find the right definition. It's almost like they're in a lab. They're trying to find the right mixture in order to create this perfect male ideal, right? There's no such thing, but I think there are certain ingredients that contribute to being a man. I think for one, accountability, as I mentioned before. I think also responsibility. I think being a provider, a protector. I think also providing guidance. But what does it mean to be a man outside of performing service for others, right? What does it mean to be a man, just a man for yourself? For me, it means being consistent. That's what being a man does. Being a man is consistent. Being a man also is just strength. Strength. We're just owning our strength. We are created strong. We are created strong. So it's taking ownership of our strength. It's not apologizing for our strength because other people want to call it toxic. You know, I don't really like that term toxic because it leaves no compassion for men. I prefer wounded masculinity, not toxic masculinity, wounded masculinity. Because oftentimes we as men are wounded, except we don't get that care and concern because of our strength. I think the world is now threatened by masculinity, and in some ways they have a right to be, given the atrocities committed by a lot of broken men. Yes, but that's not representative of the entire population of men. That subset of broken men is not representative of the entire population of men. There are some good men in the world. You know, me personally, I've struggled to find good men and good role models to look at. I was raised with no real male role models, if you want to know the truth. A lot of my uncles, they were cautionary tales. They were in and out of jail. They were womanizers. They were killers. They were substance abusers. They were just not savory men at the time. They were wounded men. And so I was taught to, I guess, find role models in women. And for the longest time, my behavior was patterned after women, so much so I would be accused of having sugar in my tank. I would be accused of being a faggot, of being, this is quote, sissy, limp wrists, you know, just all these different, just derogatory terms to describe something that wasn't my fault, you know? You know, we talk about social learning theory in social work, and oftentimes we are socialized by watching other people. You know, we learn how to do things and how to be by watching other people. And if all those people in your life were women, a woman taught me how to shave. A woman taught me how to shave, my grandmother. A woman taught me how to tie my tie, a neighbor. She was a female. A woman taught me how to walk, talk, my mom. You know, so it's like I learned how to be a man from watching a woman. And so many of our men are learning how to be a man from watching women. And I got to be honest, that's not the best way to learn how to be a man. It's not. Because oftentimes what's going to happen is that the woman, you know, unwittingly and inadvertently, she will take certain ingredients out of the boy child. You know, ingredients that he needs to survive as a man. But she'll take those because she don't find them desirable. She doesn't think that those are savory, those are desirable. So she'll customize her version of masculinity project that onto her son. And that's gonna definitely just erode his masculine presentation. That's gonna alter and disrupt the authenticity of his masculinity. And so I see that happening all the time. I see young boys, you know, with a switch in their hips, you know, they're trying their best to survive, not having that masculine role model. And I see this at the gym oftentimes too. These men are definitely trying to beef it up. You know, they don't really present like that. Their voice is not that deep, you know, and you could tell because when they get around women, they tend to soften. You know, men tend to soften around women, but when they get around other men, they tend to get harder. They tend to put on this mask. And I think this is why it's hard to find male friendship too, because oftentimes these men will engage in competitiveness and they will engage in competitions with other men. And you can't build friendship with someone that you're threatened by, you know? If you have this unconscious fear, or if you perceive this person as a threat, I don't know if you're going to really, really connect with that person. And friendships, they require a level of vulnerability and intimacy that most men struggle with. We have been socialized to be stoic, unemotional, unafraid, just to bury our emotions behind this veneer of masculinity. But truth is, it's not authentic. And so many men are, for one, struggling to find healthy friendship. There is a crisis right now and an epidemic of male loneliness right now as a result of us continuing to try to maintain this image and this mask of masculinity. Our health is suffering. Now there's a study that confirms that More men suffer from broken heart syndrome than women. Once upon a time, it was thought to be the opposite. But now, men have elevated levels of broken heart syndrome, you know? And this is all because we're sitting here trying to carry the weight of perception. We're trying to carry the weight of just false beliefs about masculinity. You know, we're trying to hold up under the weight of all these false definitions and false beliefs, and it's killing us. It's killing us because it's not authentic to who we truly are. And so we need to reimagine masculinity. We need to redefine what it means to be a man in 2025. What does that look like? You know, what does that look like? What are the ingredients of a man in 2025? And not based on service to other people. What does it mean to be our own man? Our own man, just for us, because I think that once we get solid in that definition, we can then begin to provide just secure love, because we first have to make sure that we're solid. How can we be solid for our wives, our mothers, our sisters, if we're not secure in our own masculinity? If we're not convinced, because I think that that is the issue. We are not fully convinced that we are real men. We're not fully convinced. We think that our worth as men comes from our penis size, how much we provide, how much money we make, how our apartment looks, how big our apartment is, all these factors, how big our muscles are, how deep our voice is, you know, how many women, you know, we can have sex with, and how many partners we can just, you know, something, you know, so this is how we base our masculinity. These are the measures that we base our masculinity on. And all these measures, everything that I mentioned is fleeting. Everything that I mentioned is fleeting. As you get older as a man, your ability to perform in the bedroom can definitely be affected. So if you base your masculinity or your feelings about being a man on that, that's in flux. You know, if you base your masculinity on how many partners or women you can, that's going to slow down. You know, if you base it on your house, your car, your muscles, your this, your that, all those things are fleeting. You know, so who are you as a man outside of your body parts, outside of the money you make, the external? You know, I want to tap into the masculine spirit, the spirit, because the spirit has nothing to do with the flesh. What does it mean to have a masculine spirit? That's the question we need to begin to ask ourselves. A masculine spirit is strong. A masculine spirit knows how to resist temptation. A masculine spirit is disciplined. Disciplined, that's a key also. To be a man, you have to be disciplined. You have to be decisive. You have to be devout, committed. To be a man is to take responsibility. If you make a mistake, you apologize. You address the matter. You make amends. You stand in your mistake and you correct it. You don't cover it up. You don't try to protect your ego and protect your image at the expense of truth. And I think this is what it means to be a man. It means being of fine character. What is character? Character to me is maintaining your integrity even in the face of opposition, maintaining your integrity even when there's no one there looking. If no one's there to see you, will you continue to be good? That's the question that you have to ask yourself as a man. It's maintaining that integrity even when other people are criticizing your choices or your decisions. You standing on it, standing 10 toes down. You are resolute. You are convinced. You're not led astray by this person, this person, this person. Now, this doesn't mean that you don't take what they have to say into consideration, but at the same time, in the final analysis, you make the decision and you stand on it. And that's what being a man is. But once again, that's just one facet of being a man. There's so many different facets. And I want to begin to think about this because I want to think about the masculine spirit as opposed to the masculine body or the masculine flesh, the masculine presentation. What is the masculine spirit? Because I see too many of us out here performing and we're not being authentic. And this is why we're struggling to find friendships, to find love, to be committed partners to our partners. You know, we're not, you know, and even being committed, being fathers to our children, you know, uncles to our nieces and nephews, you know, sons to our mothers and fathers. We just don't know how to be men. And I think this is the first, and this, they don't teach you this in school. They don't teach you how to be secure in your masculinity. I never had a class on how to be secure in my masculinity. Never. Now we have things where people are gender neutral, gender affirming, gender this, everything's about gender. It's just, please, people need to just tap into what God created them to be. That's what I feel. You are created to be who God created you to be. Tap into that energy. Tap in. I think a lot of people don't want to assign themselves a gender, you know? Now people are non-binary, you know? It's just so much confusion out here nowadays, you know? So much confusion. And I think the young ones, they have it really tough right now because they're trying to be understanding, they're trying to be compassionate, and they're trying to leave room for different perspectives, right? But sometimes in leaving so much room for different perspectives, you also leave room for confusion. And I think the devil is the author of confusion. He wants to confuse people so much and distort gender and sexuality and distort all these things so that way we can stay in this cycle of confusion. So much so that we don't rely on God, that we don't lean into his wisdom. We're so stuck and fixated and distracted by confusion, we don't have time for clarity. But it's time to be clear. It's time to be clear. It's time to realize who you are, who you were created to be, and walk in that. I know when I say it to you, I say it to me too, because once again, I was on this path to confusion, always trying to journey, trying to find masculinity, trying to find, you know, but the answer is right here. You know, God created us in his image. He created man and he created woman. And so you have to own who you are. And I know when it comes to gender and sex and there's all this confusion, but I know for me, I know that I was created to be a man, and somewhere along the lines, that definition became unclear to me. Somewhere along the lines, I was afflicted with confusion as to what it means to be a man. But I'm realizing that, you know, something, it's more than just your parts. It's more than just how you present. It's more than that. While that is a factor, you know, while that is definitely a factor, it's more. You know, so as I continue on trying to gain clarity on what it means to be a man, I'm going to continue searching for the man in me, because I realized that that's step one, being solid in who I am as a man. So that way, I can definitely be solid and present and secure with other men and also with those who I say I love. So I hope this video was helpful, y'all. I know I went and talked about all different types of things, but at the same time, I just feel like it's time that we as men begin to get clear on what it means to be a healthy man in 2025. Because if we continue on with this broken definition of masculinity, we're going to become extinct as men. So, thank y'all for listening. Peace.